Ed here from Crystal Clear Aquatics. Just here carrying out a small service on a formal raised pond, and a great opportunity for me to show you how to service an Oase filtral 9000. So this is the unit. This is an Oase filtral 9000, which is an all-in-one pump filter with an integrated submersible UV as well. So there are compromises on a system like this. Obviously it's quite a small unit and it's only really designed for small ponds. This particular pond here holds about 300 gallons or thereabouts in volume, but it's a raised pond and it's surrounded by paving, so it would be very difficult to put a sort of submersed pump with an external filtration system in without having to do a lot of invasive removal of paving and other bits and pieces. So to have a sort of a plug and play all-in-one system like this is very convenient, and the fact that you can literally just drop it in the pond, you've got one electrical flex, one connection, and off you go, couldn't be easier. Now the disadvantages of something like this, apart from the size, which means you've got a smaller surface area, less filtration in the first place, is that of course it's in the pond and one needs to get it out of the pond to give it a clean, and a filter is only as good as you know how frequently you can maintain it. So this is the kind of spring annual service where I'll take it apart fully and, all importantly, replace the UVC tube, and I will take this apart and show you how you do this. So you'll see that at either ends of the unit you've got these little sort of plastic clips, one at the front and one at the rear, and you can open these up and then essentially the whole thing will split in half. But before we do this, we need to remove this fountain riser pipe assembly, and you simply unscrew that. So once you've removed the fountain riser, you can open the two clips either side here, lift the top off, and that will reveal the top section, which houses the pump, the electrics and the UVC, and the lower section here, this is the filtration. So this needs to be taken apart now and given a really good clean. It's very tempting to give it a good blast with a jet wash or a hose, but we don't want to do that. We want to retain as much of this beneficial bacteria as possible. So this needs to be cleaned out in buckets of pond water and just sort of squeezed so that we can preserve as much of this important stuff as possible. I'll give this a clean and then I'll tackle the UVC and show you what you have to do. Okay, so I've cleaned the bulk of the filtration media here, and you can see all the various components laid out. To reassemble, these little sort of plastic contraptions will slide back over these little upright holders here. Now there was an awful lot of slurry and muck once I'd removed all the media that was sitting inside the housing here, so this has just had a bit of a hosing down, and that is something that you can give a proper clean with a hose or a jet wash or a bit of a scrub. You'll notice there's a plastic sort of dividing plate here, a baffle, which divides the pump and the UV section from the filtration area. This just slides out. I've given that a clean, and then to put it back into place, you'll see you've got these two little raised sections here, and they will slide in with these two proud areas here and just slide into place like so. We've got the two bags of ballast here and here, the fine filter foam and then the coarse filter foam. Now obviously I could get this cleaner if I was really giving it a good blast with a hose, but the idea of cleaning a filter isn't to get it looking brand new, because filters work, as I frequently say, much more effectively when they're partially clogged and dirty, because they're able to sort of polish the water and trap all the really fine particles. So this has had 2 or 3 rinses in some pond water, a bucket of pond water and a squeeze out, and that's fine. So the next job now is to replace the UVC tube. So in the remaining top section of the filtral, you can see in here we've got the pump here on the left, and then the ballast and the UVC housing here central and to the right. And to remove all of this from the top of the filter, we just need to uncouple and unscrew the top section here, which is where the fountain riser was attached. So having removed the lock nut, the whole top will come away, and you've now got all the electrical components. Now again, this is a bit mucky, I'll give it a good clean before I really tackle it. But this is the ballast here and the electrics for the UVC, and it's this section here that we want to remove, which will then access the quartz sleeve and the UV tube within, and obviously that's what we want to replace. Now again, it's not very easy to see because it's covered in muck, but on this side here you've got a little thumb sort of spring clip, and you can press this to release the clip and then twist the housing, and this whole section here will come away. You can see that there's also a little diagram here to show you how to do that. I'll give this a bit of a clean and then I'll take it apart. So now I've given it a clean, you can see a little bit more clearly now the features on here. This is the diagram which shows you how to access the quartz sleeve. You've got a little arrow here as well, which you can see is embossed on the plastic, and this shows you the direction you need to rotate the housing to be able to release the quartz sleeve. So by pressing the little spring clip here and rotating the quartz housing in the direction the arrow is pointing, and then pulling away, you'll reveal the quartz sleeve and the UVC tube inside. Now again, this is very dirty. This would need to be cleaned up first. You know, it's always prudent to clean a quartz sleeve. Just a little bit of tissue, just to wipe over. If there was a lime scale sort of build up, that would need to be soaked in some descaler or sort of scraped away. But this is just a bit of silt and sediment, so that comes off nice and easily. Now you'll note that you've got an O-ring. Sometimes that will stay in place at the sort of ballast end, and other times it may well remain within the housing, but you want to keep an eye on this because you don't want to drop it and lose it. Potentially putting it back together without it wouldn't be ideal, so I'll put that to one side. Now you'll see you've got one security screw, and then you've got a threaded sort of lock nut, which I'll undo, and that will allow me to pull away the quartz sleeve. So having removed the lock nut that keeps the quartz sleeve in place, the quartz sleeve can be released. And now in principle it's a case of just grabbing hold of the tube and pulling it away. Quite often when it's been sat in the housing for a full season and not been touched, this can, you know, create quite a lot of suction, and it's quite a daunting process to pull this away because they're quite fragile. This particular one came away quite easily. I just gave a little bit of force. I could feel that it was coming away, so I just continued to lift. Always make sure you lift, you know, vertically as true and straight as possible. Don't put any sort of angle or flex on it because you risk damaging the little fluted base of the quartz sleeve there. If you struggle to remove this, I find that a heat gun blowing some warm air around the O-ring here for 2 or 3 minutes just helps to soften the whole thing up, makes it a lot easier to remove it. That comes away. I should be very careful with the quartz sleeve. Now the UV tube just pulls away. 2 little pins that locate inside to lock it into place. You've got a little rubber end cap which we'll salvage and hang on to, and I shall replace this now with a new UV tube. As I always stress in any videos, it's always essential to replace the UV tube once a year, every year in spring. You know, sort of March, April time is the time to do it. There's still, you know, the tube itself is still working, but you can clearly see that it's got signs of use, and the amount of UV it produces after a season's, you know, diminishes and drops dramatically. So it's always essential to make sure you've got a clean, fresh UV tube in spring when the pond is most likely to go green. I'm going to replace this with a genuine Oase Phillips tube. So to install the new UV tube, simply reverse the process. The 2 little locating pins that will locate into the housing there, just push that into place and that clicks. I'll replace the little rubber end cap on the UV tube, and the quartz sleeve, having been previously cleaned, just slides over the top. Now one little tip is to annually lubricate the seal. I mean, always inspect it for any sort of potential damage every year you take it apart. Obviously they can be replaced if needs be, but just give it a bit of a lube, and that will help to keep it nice and supple and mean that next season when you come to take it apart, it shouldn't be too difficult to pull that quartz sleeve away. So finally just replace the lock nut, screw that into place. Now with the filtral, you can only go so far and then it will stop, and that's as far as you need to go. It's as far as you can go. And then we replace and tighten down the safety screw. Now if ever you lose the screw, it's not the end of the world. It's only there to stop you from being able to open this by mistake, but that's never going to happen. So that's clamped down. Now again, always clean O-rings and seals. So that's clean. I'm going to give this just a little bit of a smear of Vaseline here, silicone sealant, Vaseline, both does the job there. And I'm going to relocate that here on the ballast, next to the ballast. There we go. And then I'm just going to carefully slide over the quartz leaf housing. And then twist it and lock it back into place. So just to show you that again, it can be a bit fiddly. When you're placing this back over the quartz sleeve, if you remember that little arrow that shows you the direction you twist it, if you offer it up so that arrow is just slightly lower than the thumb screw, and then push down, all the lugs will locate into place, and then you can nice and easily twist it up and it clicks into position. Another important feature here is you've got a little viewing window, and the idea is that when the UV is switched on, this sort of glows up blue or purple and shows you the tube is working. Now what invariably happens is this gets covered in muck and algae, and of course because the whole system is submerged in the pond and it's not particularly obvious or accessible, you don't really see that's working. But it's worth keeping that clean and trying to position this somewhere in the pond where you have access, where you can view it and have a look now and again to make sure it's working. So the next job now is to reassemble the whole unit. Now when you reassemble this, of course it's important that you configure everything correctly. So you can see, obviously you've replaced the little screen here, and that's slid down and locked into place, into position. And you'll see on the left here a sort of circular area. That's where the electronics, the ballast for the UV will sit. And over to the right hand side here, where you'll see a little hole that pops through down into the filtration section there, that's where the pump impeller effectively sucks in water through the filtration system. So it's important that the pump end fits over here by that locating hole, otherwise you won't get it all together. So that's the filtral reassembled and put back together. I'm now going to put it back into the pond, switch it on, check the UVC just to make sure it's running, and obviously to do that it has to be plugged in. If you can't see, if your pond isn't clear, you're going to have to lift this close to the surface just so you can view that window, but be careful not to lift it proud of the water, and risk running the pump dry. But that's it. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and I'll carry on producing more videos like this. Thanks very much.